Hey everyone, Count Vamps here, and I'm here to answer another question from a follower on Instagram. So they messaged me and asked, Count Vamps, I want to get into wargaming. Where do I start? What's a good point to get into? This is a pretty good question, so I decided that I'd make a video out of it. Of course, I did answer the person as well, but we're just going to cover sort of like a beginner sort of look at where to start with wargaming, some stuff I'm going to recommend, and yeah, just things of that nature. So we'll be doing rules, miniatures, and paints. And I'm also going to stick a little sneaky thing in there up the back for the more experienced players who are trying to get other people into wargaming. So let's get started with the first category.
Rules.
So where do we start with rules? Well, it's based on where you want to kind of start. Are you looking at a full-size army where you manage whole battalions? Are you looking for just sort of like a few squads that you manage together in battalion-based warfare? Or are you looking for more of a skirmish base where you just have a squad of 4 to 10 guys? And really, at the end of the day, it's where you choose to go. But I'm going to make a recommendation for newer players where they should start. And I think you should start with skirmish games. Why should you start with skirmish games? Well, if you play a skirmish game, you find you don't like it, you can move on to a different one. Or maybe you figure out that wargaming's just not your bag. And then at that point, you've only spent, maybe $100 total to find out that you didn't like wargames. Which is not a terrible price to pay as far as wargames are concerned. So, why skirmish games? Well, you've got 4 to 10 miniatures, you're not going too crazy, everything is just on the level, and it's also much easier to find other players who play skirmish games because of the same reasons. So my recommendation is to start with skirmish games and then work your way out from there. If you really want to desperately get into battalion-based warfare and full army scale warfare, then absolutely go in that direction. But start with a skirmish game, get a feel, and you're not going to be breaking the bank. Now, what do you do with rules? How do you find rules? Well, the first thing I would recommend is pick something that you like the sound of. Maybe you like Terminator. Maybe you want to play the Terminator miniature game. Maybe you're a big fan of Game of Thrones and you want to try a Song of Ice and Fire. Maybe you're a big fan of Star Wars or Marvel and you want to have a go at one of those. That's a great place to start. But what I would recommend for first-time players is pick a genre. So if you want to do sci-fi, have a look at the sci-fi games out there. If you're more of a historical person, look at what the historical sort of offerings are. If you are a fantasy guy, then do it for that. And also, I'd recommend doing a bit of research and finding out which games offer free rules. Now, these rules will come in 2 flavors. Free rules. They'll either be the full rules, and they really expect you to buy the miniatures to make them their money, or they'll be a quick start guide. You can also just find playtest rules, which are generally free as well. But we're going to count full rule sets. Or you'll find a quick play rule that will be, maybe half of the permanent rules just to get your teeth cut on them. But I know what you're thinking. Vamps, I've come here for a recommendation. Can you make one? Yes, I can actually. So I think anything by 1-page rules is an immediate great point to start with. So Grimdark Future Firefight for Skirmish. And then you've got Age of Fantasy for their fantasy ones and Age of Fantasy Skirmish for their skirmish one. These are great little starting points. One, the full rules are cheap. You'll get the basic rules, which just don't have any of the really niceties. All the rules are very much, this is, if a unit has this rule, it's the same across any unit that has that rule, including other armies. So it's very easy to pick up and play, get into a game, figure it out. It's nice and simple, but it also has that really sort of pure, like, you are an army commander and you got to try and figure out how to position you guys. So I find that because the rules are a bit more simplistic, it lets you make very big tactical decisions over the course of the game. rather than relying on a special rule where you roll some dice and maybe the enemy dies. Now, do I think that this is a stopping point? No, I don't. I think one-page rule systems are great for people cutting their teeth on them, but I also think that there are better games out there. So don't stop at one-page rules, but I definitely recommend starting there. And it's also great because it's miniature agnostic, which I will get into on the miniature section, what that is. So basically, that's what I recommend, but I'm going to pop up right here a list of games. So you'll notice that there are 4 in each category. So there are 4 fantasy, 4 historical, and 4 sci-fi. So you can, when you go to your next game, you can pick off the list and just play, or you can roll a d4 on one of the lists. And you may have noticed that they have brackets next to the 1 to 4 numbers, and that's if you're really lost and you just want to have a go at something. Roll a d12, go nuts. Okay, let's move on to the next section at this point.
Miniatures.
Miniatures. What do you get? Where do you get them from? Who are you? What are you doing in my house? Well, I'll answer 2 of those questions. I'm Count Vamps, and I'm currently in your house because you're watching a YouTube video. Well, that's it for the miniature section. Huh? Sorry? What do you mean? You sure? You sure I answered the wrong 2 questions? Really? People want the other... okay. Sorry, my editor, Rennie, has told me that I need to answer the other 2 questions. What do you get? Where do you get them from?
What do you get?
What miniatures do you get? It's a good question. And really, I think you get the appropriate miniatures for the game. Now, whether or not the game is miniature agnostic or not, that's the question. So, I've used that term a couple times this video now. What the hell is miniature agnostic? Does that mean the miniatures may believe in a god, but it's probably not the emperor of mankind? No, that's not quite what it means. So basically, miniatures come in 2 categories. Miniature exclusive games and miniature agnostic games. Exclusive games, they want you to use the miniatures that they are making. So Warhammer is a prime example of this. If you want to go and play at a local game club with Warhammer, you need to have the correct miniatures, generally. Miniature agnostic is that it's really more about the base size. You can use whatever the hell miniatures you want, as long as they're on the correct base for that unit. So you can show up with a whole bunch of space lizard guys and say that they're, space marines for a miniature agnostic game. And that's fine, as long as they're on the correct base size for space marines, you're fine. Not a problem. So, my recommendation for new players is try and pick a mini-agnostic game, which I've already recommended Grimdark Future and the others of its ilk, because they're miniature agnostic. But you can find many games that are miniature agnostic, and in fact, if you play at home, any game is miniature agnostic. So, just get miniatures that you like, and play it with friends.
Where do you get them?
So, now that you know what miniatures you might be looking for, where do you get them? So, I think the biggest thing I want to say is it's alright to be loyal to a brand. If you really like Privateer Press miniatures or Die Hard miniatures, whichever ones you want, that's alright to be loyal to them. Don't be loyal to the store. I know that's a bit hard and a bit rough for people who go, well, I like my local game store and I want to shop there. Great. Awesome. The reason why I say to new players don't be loyal to a store is because you'll always be able to find a store that has something on sale, right? You'll be able to find a better price online, or possibly your local game store might even have a sale on something. In fact, I've got something here to show you guys very quickly. These are Hordes miniatures from Privateer Press. Now, the price tag on the box says $84. That's kind of expensive for, 6 guys. I found this in my local game store in the bargain bin for $14. So I bought it because I'm going to turn them into something for Dungeons & Dragons. So you can shop and find better prices, and almost someplace online will have a sale. You'll always be able to find miniatures for anywhere from 10 to 30% off, and sometimes if you get lucky, you can get all the way up to 50. It's great. So, shop around and be patient. Now, I'm going to make another video on this particular topic called Wargaming on a Budget, so we'll go into more detail then. And I'm also going to have a secondary video for that, where I'm going to buy a bunch of miniatures off of Wish.com, AliExpress, etc., etc., and we're going to then open them on a video, and we'll see what we get for what we got at the price. So I think that'll be kind of fun. But just remember that you can have a look around and just see what you can find price-wise. Now, do keep in mind, make sure you vet the company before you buy them, because if you find a company that's giving 50% off on every Warhammer miniature, they might not be legit. You might get scammed, either in the product or just it never arriving. So make sure you keep an eye on what's legit and what's not.
Paints!
So you've got your miniatures now. You've got your rules. The next step is getting some paints. Where do you go for paints? Like, what do you get? Is there any good brands, recommendations, or whatever? So my strongest recommendation is to get miniature paint. Yes, I understand. I get people out there, because I've seen this happen before. Beginners will buy this giant thing of craft paint, and then they'll paint their miniatures with it, and they'll go, why the hell do these look way worse than even other beginner miniatures? Well, it's because you're using this. Now I get it. Like, this is $3. This is like $4. You know, why should I pay so much for much less paint? So, pigment is the answer. Pigment basically boils down to this. Pigment is the color in the paint, and it comes in various sizes. Miniature paint is very fine, because you have to paint a face on the guy this big. You have to paint the guy's face this big, and if you use higher pigment paint, they come out looking blotchy, as though they've just gone out into the Australian sun without sunscreen. Their face has melted off. This is what you get when you use this, because the pigment is much larger, so it's not quite as fine. It doesn't go on the model as well. But I understand. Like, I mean, can't I turn this into miniature paint vamps? Good question. Technically, yes. It involves a lot of screwing around, though. You need to get medium and thinner, and you need to then make a mix of the two, and then you need to mix this in with another mix, and then you give it a really good shake, and then hopefully you end up with paint that is roughly miniature in quality, but there's also a good chance it won't work. I know this looks like a giant thing of paint that will last you for ages, but these last a long time. They really do. I'm not joking. You want a demonstration? Here's a game color bottle. This bottle is about, maybe 20 years old, and it still paints fine. I'm still getting paint out of it. It's still over half full. I mean, I use it, but that's what I mean, is that you will end up owning a lot of paint by the end of your lifespan as a wargamer. Trust me, they last. You'll be fine. Don't buy hobby paint unless you're going to use it for terrain or some other minor things. Bite the bullet, buy actual miniature game paint, and buy a set like you can get from Army Painter, for example. You can get 12 paints for about $30, and if you get desperate, you can mix them. But that's what I recommend. Buy an Army Painter set, or whatever paint brand you've picked. Buy a set of that, paint the miniatures, call it a day. You're good to go.
Brushes!
I'm just going to quickly touch on this particular little section, paintbrushes. So I did this in my where to start painting video, but I'm just going to chuck it in here as well. At the end of the day, when you're a new painter, buy cheap brushes. You want them somewhere from 000 to a number 2 in size for most miniature paints. don't bother buying yourself a set of sable brushes or wolf bristle brushes or anything like that, because what will end up happening is you'll just ruin them. Cut your teeth on crappy brushes, and then you can get yourself a nice set of special brushes. I only recently bought myself my first lot of sable brushes. So yeah, don't start with sable, start with crap, work your way up.
Getting games!
Okay, so we've got all our stuff we need to wargame. Where do we wargame? Now see, this is the immortal question of wargaming, guys. Where do I find a game? So my strongest recommendation for new players is to get into it with a friend. See if you can bring a friend in, see if they will play with you, and go from there. Now, the other option is, say you go, well, Vamps, I don't really have any friends, or I don't have any friends who are interested in war games. My apology about your friendless status. It'll improve, trust me. So at that point, you want to head down to your local game store and ask if they know of any gaming clubs, including if they run any games in their local gaming club. And then you join them and you play there. Now, I understand. I get it. You go, well, Vamps, I've decided to play Gaslands and no one's playing Gaslands. What do I do? So this is also a question that experienced gamers might have. You know, Count Vamps, I've been playing for 12 years. I really want to play this game, but I can't find anyone to play it with. I've heard this before, just for the record. I've experienced this before. You know, there were some nights there that I really wanted to play Warhammer Fantasy and no one was around to play it. So, how do you get people to play war games when they just don't really want to make the jump? You buy them in. What do I mean by this? I mean, you buy 2 armies and you convince the other person to play with you because you're supplying everything. Yeah, it's not great, and this is why I also recommend skirmish games to get people into wargaming, because it's a lot cheaper to buy, 6 miniatures and get them to play with you than it is to buy 2,000 points of whatever insane game that you're currently playing. So, particularly if you take something like Silver Bayonet, which is a great little historical Napoleonic era game where you also fight monsters. Very cool. But you can buy a box of Napoleon miniatures and you can get 20 or 30 miniatures depending on what box you get, and that's going to cover 3 to 4 people's worth of army. So you can get multiple people in at the price of just, what you normally spend to get into the war game yourself. Because if you're playing Silver Bayonet, you're only running like 6-7 miniatures. You have to buy a box of 20 miniatures. You've already got a second army waiting for you. So that's what I recommend. And I know it's not great. It's not a great, suggestion. But pay more money and get someone in. But sadly, it works more often than not. I've got many friends to play war games with me because I go, I supply the miniatures and the rules and everything. You just need to show up and roll the dice. And so that's it. That's it for my particular advice on wargaming, where to start, how to get into it. Now, there is an absolute wealth of war games out there. More war games than probably most people will ever get to play. So start with something simple and just move in. Just move in and start playing. Remember, there's always online as well, even though that's not really what I'm sort of shooting for here. This is more, I want to play the war games on the table, which is how I prefer to play. I've never really found war games online as entertaining. If I'm going to play a war game online, I'm going to play Command & Conquer or StarCraft or something. But yeah, so start there and move your way forward. We will get more in depth as this series continues, hopefully to sort of push forward more concepts for more advanced wargamers. But right now, I'm looking at beginners. I want to get more people on the tables. I want to get more people playing, and I want people to play a variety of games. Variety is the spice of life, guys. I found my favorite RPG system ever by just randomly stumbling onto it with a friend. It's called GURPS, by the way. If you're ever looking for a really cool RPG system, give GURPS a go. I know it sounds like a disease, but it's a really good system. It is somewhat of a disease, though, because it just gets stuck in your brain. You're like, man, I just want to play GURPS all the time. Thank you so much for joining me. You have a great day, and there'll be more videos in the future. Reviews, both small and large. And we're also going to be looking at more war stories. So keep an eye out for them. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.